Hey there everybody, today is Friday, June 19th, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the PUA unemployment and how the PPP or EIDL affects it. But first, I would love it if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, stay up to date with everything going on right now. And if you have already subscribed, thank you for your support. And if you have a chance, which I'm sure you do, smash that like button, I would really appreciate it. Also, in the comments below, let me know what you've taken for granted or what you realize that you've taken for granted since the start of this pandemic. For me, it's just being able to just go out whenever you want and just hang out or, or go into a restaurant. Like just the simple things, just go into the grocery store, like simple things like that. I definitely have taken for granted, but since this whole thing started, it's just made it much more difficult to go to restaurants, to the grocery store, all that stuff. Or, there's this air of like caution now. You gotta wear a mask, you gotta do all this stuff. You gotta potentially wipe down all your shit. It's been a little difficult, and that's definitely one thing I've taken for granted. Let me know below what you've taken for granted. Also, in the description below, I got a link to my Facebook group. Join my Facebook group to stay up to date with what's going on. Like, I only post one video a day, and so if things happen midday, I usually would just put it in the Facebook group. So join that, stay up to date. I'll see you there. All right, so there's a lot of questions about whether or not the PPP will affect unemployment, and I got a couple of different ways to look at this, and all in all, it pretty much boils down to what state you're in and how they handle it. But basically, the PPP is a loan, okay? Even though it's focused on payroll, it's a loan. So, the treatment of this is different between a self-employed person versus a business who employs people. So first I'm going to talk about self-employed folks. So since the PPP is a loan, although it's meant to be used as income, self-employed folks don't really pay themselves a salary. So what does this even mean? When you get the PPP, it's fully forgiven as payroll expense. And what that means to me is that it was used to cover your personal pay. Now, that means that since you have personal pay, that may affect your unemployment. However, the tricky thing is, if that PPP is forgiven, it's not considered technically income, so it may not affect your unemployment. The key here is that you probably got to check with your state and see how they handle this, because I know all the states do it differently, and it might not affect your unemployment. If it does affect your unemployment and you got the PPP, it might be too low of an amount to drastically affect your unemployment. Because from what I know, some of my clients, they're receiving the PUA right now. They're self-employed. However, that doesn't mean they can't make any income. Being self-employed, sometimes you have stuff coming in, sometimes you don't. And, I'm thinking of this one particular client of mine. He's got the PPP. Some weeks he has income, some weeks he doesn't. The weeks that he has income coming in, he reports it, and he still qualifies for unemployment. So it just depends, man. Like, just check with your state. It might affect, it might not. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you, but that's just the way it is. It's just a little tricky with self-employed people because your PPP is a loan and you're not actually paying yourself a salary. And, it's kind of been unprecedented that self-employed folks get unemployment anyway. So this whole thing has been a little confusing. Initially, I thought for sure PPP would affect unemployment, but now the more that I think about it, it's just I'm not sure, and also it really depends on the state. Your state might have questions on whether or not you receive the PPP. So check with them to know for sure. If you're on the fence about applying for the PPP because you think it might affect your unemployment, definitely check with your state first, okay? Because we're approaching the July 31st deadline where PUA will end. So if you get the PPP now and it happens to affect unemployment, then you might be screwing yourself there because there might not be an extension of PUA. So check with your state first. Check the portal. Check all the places where you would report your income. If they ask for PPP, it might affect your unemployment eligibility, but check with them first before you apply for the PPP. Now, for employers who employ employees, the PPP will definitely affect their employees. I mean, I don't know if it's going to disqualify them, but it will have an impact on their unemployment benefits. You've seen this debate, like employees not wanting to go back to work because they're making so much money on PUA and unemployment, and then their employers they have their hands tied because they need to hire their employees in order to qualify for forgiveness, and they need to pay their employees, So we were at this gridlock for a while, especially when it was just 8 weeks to spend your PPP money. But just keep in mind, if you offer your employees a job back and they refuse, then they are no longer eligible for unemployment. It's just as simple as that, because the whole point of unemployment is that you're still looking for a job, you're actively looking for a job, and you have to accept a job. And I'm pretty sure that's uniform through all the states. That puts employees in the bind, and that puts employers in the binds. And when Congress first put this PPP plan into place, I think they were thinking a little short-sighted there, a little disconnected about pandemics, about how this would affect the economy, how long businesses would be shut down, all that stuff. They were so disconnected. They made it just 8 weeks to spend your PPP. I think they screwed a lot of people because a lot of business owners panicked. They paid their employees for not doing anything, for not working, just to get the loan forgiven. And then after 8 weeks, it's like now they got no more money. So yeah, it's great that they extended the covered period to 24 weeks. However, they should have done that to begin with. Another question I've been getting a lot is, will the EIDL loan affect PUA unemployment? And I can more defiantly say that no, it will not. And the reason I think that is because the EIDL loan is used for a more broad purpose, whereas the PPP is used primarily for payroll or pay, and the EIDL loan can be used for any working capital. So as long as you allocate your EIDL loan to expenses other than payroll or other than your self-pay, then it will likely not affect your PUA at all. This goes for self-employed folks and employers with employees. So if you're an employer and you hire employees, you receive the EIDL loan and you don't use it to pay your employees, you use it to buy your inventory or pay your rent and all that crap, then that won't actually affect your employees' ability to get PUA. Okay? I think the EIDL loan is a great program. I think the SBA's ability to roll it out was nonsense. I think they finally got their shit together. By the way, I had clients that we applied for the EIDL loan like earlier this week, and they got approved yesterday. So that's how quickly they're running these now, which is great. But that should have been how it was from the beginning. They were completely unprepared for this. I don't blame them. It was a lot to take on, but still, the rollout of that was nonsense, and I'm glad people are finally getting their money. Also keep in mind that EIDL is a loan. So you receive a loan as a self-employed person. You receive a loan. It's not technically income, because especially if you have to pay it back. Okay, so you receive a loan. It's not income. That shouldn't affect your PUA. That was my secondary thought with a PPP, is that it's a loan. If you're self-employed, you receive that loan. It's not technically income, and you may have to pay it back, even though you really don't. So that shouldn't be counted as income to count against your unemployment benefits. But again, for the PPP, definitely check with your state. With the EIDL, it's just straight up a loan. You can use it for whatever you want in terms of working capital. You're not restricted to payroll, so that will not adversely affect your PUA benefits. Now, there's a lot of talk about whether or not there's going to be a PUA extension or an unemployment extension or something of that order. And the House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act like a couple months ago. It's been sitting in Senate. I'm sure Senate is tearing it apart. But basically, in the HEROES Act, there was a clause to extend PUA benefits. It sounds like Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, says that Senate Republicans will not agree to extending PUA benefits. And also, I've been hearing that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is really against extending PUA benefits also, because they think that it just incentivizes people to not work. And while that's true, you also have to remember that we're still in a pandemic. Like, a lot of states are getting ravaged still right now, with increased number of cases. And since there was already a shutdown, they're very, very hesitant to shut down again. And so now you're forcing people to work if you're not giving them any sort of help. And, I don't want to get into a debate about this. I just want to talk about the choices that people have. Okay, so when you shut down businesses, you don't give people a choice to work. All right, so let's say you don't shut down. You give people a choice to work. You give people a choice to shop and to do their normal everyday stuff. But then if you don't give them any assistance, then you don't really give them a choice to work. You're kind of forcing them to. So, somebody who has a family living with them, like a wife, a couple kids, they might not think it's worth it to work. Their life and their family's life is more important to them than to earn money, even though earning money in this economy is very important. But what good is money if you don't have your life or your child's life or your spouse's life? So I don't know. I think there should be more assistance. I think there should be more assistance for business owners and more assistance for individuals. We'll see how that plays out. I'm not really big on following stimulus check updates. I just think it's, there's just a lot of talk back and forth, and there's not really an update yet. It's just been all speculation. So I don't know. I hope there's more assistance for individuals and for small businesses, because I think the PPP, the way that was rolled out, it was garbage. It didn't help the majority of people because the majority of people were shut down while the PPP covered period was rolling along. So yeah, Chamber of Commerce does not want extended unemployments because it will incentivize people to not work. However, it kind of forces people into a really difficult situation, and valuing money or the economy over human life, that's another thing I can get into. However, I do believe that people should have a choice. I think the choices should be highly supported and not kind of forced onto them. That's all I got for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching my rant. And again, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel and please smash that like button. And have a great weekend, y'all. I'll see you on Monday. Take care.